When the girl wakes up, her right hand is frozen solid to the chairlift's metal safety bar. But that isn't even the worst part. The lift is stuck more than 30 feet above the ground. Her phone is nowhere nearby. The ski resort won't reopen for 5 days, and a pack of hungry wolves is waiting below. This is the 2010 survival thriller Frozen. The story takes place at a ski resort in the mountains. College student Dan has come here with his girlfriend, Parker, and his childhood friend, Lynch, hoping to enjoy a full day on the slopes. Parker is new to skiing, so Dan spends most of the day helping her while Lynch is stuck tagging along as the awkward third wheel. When they reach the chairlift entrance, they realize they don't have enough money for 3 lift tickets. Dan and Lynch talk Parker into asking Jason, the lift operator, if he can let them through for less. Parker doesn't want to do it, but the guys keep pushing her. She finally walks over with the cash and begs Jason to help them out. Jason refuses at first, but eventually takes the money and lets all 3 of them through. As they ride toward the top, the chairlift suddenly stops. Parker gets nervous, but Dan isn't worried because there are tourists in the chairs ahead of them and behind them. The staff will obviously get it moving again soon. Sure enough, the lift starts back up a few minutes later. None of them realizes this little malfunction is practically a warning not to get on a second time. At the top, Dan patiently teaches Parker how to ski, but she keeps falling every few feet, slowing all 3 of them down. Lynch has waited all day and still hasn't gotten one good run in. As the sun begins to set, he suggests going back up one last time so they can make a full run before closing. Dan would rather stay with Parker and rest, but Parker feels guilty for holding them back, so she agrees to go with them. The problem is, the resort is already getting ready to close, and the forecast says a blizzard is coming that night. Jason refuses to let them through and warns them they may not make it back before closing. The 3 insist that one run won't take long and keep begging him to make an exception. Jason finally gives in, starts the chairlift, and sends them up the mountain. They have no idea that this decision has just cut off their only way out. Not long after they leave, another employee comes to take over Jason's shift. Before leaving, Jason specifically tells him that 3 skiers are still on the mountain and that he can't shut the lift down until they come back. Right then, the replacement sees 3 skiers coming down the slope. Without getting a closer look, he assumes they're the people Jason was talking about. He shuts down the chairlift and gets ready to go home. Parker, Dan, and Lynch suddenly stop in midair. Since the same thing happened earlier that day, they aren't scared at first. They sit there talking, trying to guess what kind of minor problem caused the delay this time. But more than 10 minutes pass, and the lift still doesn't move. Then, the lights across the mountain begin shutting off one by one, leaving the entire resort in darkness. That's when they realize no one is fixing the lift. The staff has already gone home. They scream for help as loudly as they can, but the only answer is the sound of the wind. Even worse, none of them brought their phones, so they have no way to contact anyone. Then Parker remembers that it's Sunday, and the resort won't reopen until Friday. If no one finds them, they'll be trapped in the freezing air for 5 full days. Forget 5 days. They might not even survive the night. The snow gets heavier, and the icy wind cuts straight through their clothes. All they can do is squeeze together on the narrow chair and try to hold on to whatever body heat they have left. Just as they're starting to lose hope, a snowcat appears at the bottom of the mountain. The 3 immediately start shouting and throw down anything they can find, but the storm drowns out their voices, and the driver never looks up. After receiving an order to return to base, the snowcat turns around and disappears into the darkness. The only person who could have found them is gone. Dan knows they'll freeze to death if they just sit there. He decides to jump into the snow, ski down the mountain, and get help. Lynch tells him the drop is too dangerous and begs him to wait until morning. But Dan asks him one simple question. Even if they make it to morning, who's going to come up here? To give the other 2 a chance, Dan climbs over the safety bar and jumps. A second later, a sickening thud comes from below. Dan is still conscious, but both of his legs are broken. The bones have punched right through his ski pants, and he can barely move. Parker throws down her scarf so Dan can wrap it around his legs and stop the bleeding, but it gets caught on a tree branch. Lynch balls up his own scarf and manages to toss it close enough, Dan drags himself through the snow, fighting through the pain until he finally reaches it. He ties it tightly around his thigh, but his blood has already soaked into the snow. Soon, they hear wolves howling in the distance. One wolf follows the scent and approaches Dan. Parker throws one of the skis down, scaring it away for the moment. Lynch knows the wolf will come back. He decides to grab the cable above them, climb across to the nearest support tower, and use the ladder to reach the ground. But the cable is freezing cold and incredibly slippery. It's also covered in sharp strands of broken metal. Lynch only makes it a few feet before the wire tears through his gloves and slices open both hands. Then the wolf returns, this time with an entire pack behind it. Lynch looks down and immediately pulls himself back onto the chair. He grabs Parker and forces her head down so she won't see what's about to happen. Seconds later, Dan's screams echo across the mountain. Parker and Lynch can't do anything except sit above him and listen until the screaming finally stops. Watching her boyfriend die below her completely breaks Parker. She demands to know why Lynch didn't stop Dan from jumping, and Lynch fires back, asking why she didn't say anything either. Dan wasn't just Parker's boyfriend. He had also been Lynch's closest friend for years. They aren't blaming each other because they truly hate one another. They're both in so much pain that they need somewhere to put it. Once they calm down, Parker apologizes. They huddle together again, talking to keep themselves awake, but their bodies are exhausted, and eventually, they both fall asleep. The next morning, Parker wakes up in horrible pain. While she was sleeping, she rested her bare right hand on the metal safety bar. After hours in the freezing cold, her palm is completely stuck to it. She grits her teeth and pulls as hard as she can. The skin rips away from her palm before her hand finally comes free. This is the moment we saw at the beginning. Lynch checks her injuries and realizes Parker's face is also badly frostbitten. They both know that if they spend one more night up there, they may never wake up again. Now that it's daylight, Lynch decides to try the cable again. If they're going to survive, he has to reach the support tower and make it down the mountain to find help. He grips the cable with his injured hands and slowly pulls himself forward. Every movement drives the sharp metal deeper into his palms. The wolves follow him from below, almost like they know their prey will eventually have to come down. Lynch finally reaches the support tower and climbs down the ladder. The moment he picks up a ski pole, one of the wolves charges and sinks its teeth into his arm. Lynch swings the pole wildly and manages to fight it off. He doesn't waste another second. He straps on Parker's snowboard and races down the mountain while several wolves chase after him. From high above, Parker watches Lynch disappear into the distance. As long as he makes it down, she still has a chance. But she waits all day and into the night, and no rescue ever comes. After surviving another night alone, she wakes up to the same empty mountain. Lynch probably isn't coming back. Parker refuses to sit there and die. She stands up and prepares to climb across the cable just like Lynch did. But the moment she moves, one of the bolts holding the chair in place snaps loose. The entire chair suddenly drops, leaving it hanging by a single thin cable. The good news is that she's now much closer to the ground. The bad news is that the cable is slowly tearing apart. Parker has no choice. She lets go and jumps into the snow. The cable snaps right after she lands, and the heavy chair crashes down on her ankle. She struggles to pull her foot free, but she can no longer walk. All she can do is lie in the snow and use her hands to slowly push herself down the mountain. Along the way, Parker sees the wolf pack again. They're gathered around a body, tearing it apart. One look at the clothes tells her exactly who it is. It's Lynch. He never abandoned Parker. He just couldn't outrun the wolves. Parker freezes in fear, but the wolves are too busy feeding to come after her. She takes the chance and drags herself away, pulling her injured leg through the snow until she finally reaches a road. The first car drives right past without stopping. Parker uses the last of her strength to crawl to the roadside, then loses consciousness. Luckily, the next driver spots her. He carries Parker into his car and rushes her to the hospital. Only then does she finally escape the mountain. People always think disasters happen to someone else, but a lot of deadly situations begin with the same simple thought: it'll probably be fine. If you were trapped on that chairlift, would you stay put and wait for help, or risk everything trying to get down?